Hello and welcome to this episode of the CWSI Thought Leadership Series. Today we're going to be talking security and compliance, and specifically we're going to be talking about the Network and Information Systems Directive, more commonly known as NIS2. I've got a couple of very exciting guests with me today. I've got Tomás and Nikki, and I'd like to invite you to introduce yourselves. Nikki, if you'd like to go first.
Hi, so hi Paul, hey Tomás, and hi everybody else. My name is Nikoleta Gamanova. I am the partner GTM lead representing EMEA Microsoft for security solutions. And today I'm delighted to join this discussion on NIS2, which is really hot across the board and the industry.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Tomás?
Hi everyone. Hi Paul and hi Nikki. Thanks for inviting us, Paul, to this great session. I am Tomás Casasco. I am the data security go-to-market lead in Western Europe for Microsoft. And basically, I am also driving a lot of efforts that we are doing internally and also with our partners to connect the regulatory motions with our sales engine to create and increase the level of awareness that our customers and partners should have on the new regulations. And that's why, I am really excited to have this conversation with you around the upcoming regulation NIS 2.0.
Brilliant, and I'm really excited to have this conversation. It's an area that I'm quite interested in. Not everybody gets excited about regulation though, so I suppose maybe let's start with a simple question. What is NIS2 and why should our listeners care? And maybe Tomás, you could start with that one.
Sure, I think that we are in a unique moment in several areas, right? And when it comes to NIS2, I want to clarify that NIS2 would be a new European cybersecurity directive, which basically will be an evolution of the existing one that we have, NIS 1.0, and it will come into force in October of 2024. Basically, NIS 2 will be the most comprehensive European regulation that we're going to have until now, and it will cover 18 sectors from critical infrastructure and essential entities, and it will impact more than 180,000 companies. I think that the main goal is really to establish like a common baseline of cybersecurity procedures for all the European regulations, because what the European Union is seeing, and this is what we see every day, right, that cyber attacks are becoming more frequent and more sophisticated. The attack surface is expanding as customers embrace it, hybrid work solutions, as customers are, kind of changing their way that they work, introducing AI into their businesses. The cybersecurity landscape is becoming super complex. So there's a need to harmonize that, to establish a common set of procedures. And I think that also another key element of this is that we have a lot of local regulations now addressing the cybersecurity, but this will become as an upper umbrella to try to add some regulatory consistency on this matter. So I think that this is, the new GDPR for us, right? It will become, a new regulation, but it will become, I think that, something that it will become here to stay from a cybersecurity perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I've been to a few conferences lately where this has been discussed, and I think the key thing that struck me was the lack of harmonization. So the fact that all the different EU countries, and then within the countries, the different organizations, public and private, and how all that landscape, there is no kind of common ground in terms of how they address cyber threats, cyber attacks, and also more importantly, there's no common ground for sharing information about incidents. So, there's a lot of opportunity there for cyber criminals or nation states to slide in through the cracks. So I think I'm very excited. I think this is something that could raise the overall baseline posture of everybody in Europe.
Yeah, and if you think about how fast everything is evolving, I think that we are always like trying to catch up, on all the new landscape that cybersecurity is basically entailing. So I think that this is something that, from one side, is something that organizations should really take seriously, but also I think that it's also an opportunity for organizations to use this regulation as a way to really strengthen their cybersecurity posture. So I think that definitely I would position this regulation not as a risk, but also as an opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. I think CISOs should not just see this as a big pile of work. It's an opportunity then for potentially to get access to funding and to do things that they probably wanted to do for quite a long period of time, but now there's going to be management support for it. I suppose moving more into the application of NIS2, let's get into maybe more of the actual detail. And maybe I'll come to you on this one, Nikki. What are the kind of key areas that you and Microsoft or with your partners are seeing customers focusing on around this topic at the moment?
Well, I think this is a pretty complex question to address, but what we see the most is every customer, especially relative to their size or industry, is at a different stage of preparedness for NIS2. Yes, NIS2 is not live until next October, but actually there's a lot of work that needs to be done for each organization to get ready. And so when I think about even the small customers that only a few employees, there's still a basic hygiene, a basic protection like MFA that they need to put in. Then I think about the mid to the large size customers, and of course where the more complex operations and the more complex business model you have, the more work you actually have to put in. But the good thing is that there's a ton of wonderful assessments out there that can help customers start to understand where they are at the moment in respect to the basic hygienes that we already know of that NIS2 will bring in. Because after all, NIS2 is nothing but what is essentially bringing in all the regulations we have so far. The GDPR, the CIS, a bit more and new on data security, which I absolutely applaud. I think we really need to get better at that. Both Microsoft, both partners, both customers, everybody in the organization across the board, and really actually really encouraging organizations to start thinking about protecting themselves proactively. And that's something I really love, because if I was a CISO, I would be really nervous being reactive to being hit rather than being proactive and preventing that, which of course has a big cost element associated with it. And so when I think about this complexity around that every customer is at a different phase and different place of how ready they are for NIS2, we, from Microsoft perspective, are looking into our top partners, and CWSI is one. Paul, looking at you for this one, to really proactively engage with our customers, help them assess their posture, risk exposure, where they are really on the basic or even advanced security, depending on where they are on their journey. And from there, build a short to long-term plan as NIS2 begins to evolve as well. As we know, some of the controls are not out yet, but many are actually quite well known, and there's a lot that can be done today. And this is really what we encourage customers to do. Connect with our top partners. All of you, CWSI is really leading the curve on this one to help you understand where you are and progress from there with a solid plan.
Yeah, I think that's really, really good. And I really like the way you mentioned the fact that this isn't a new set of things, realistically. This is bringing together stuff that, like good cyber hygiene, taking elements from NIST frameworks, ISO frameworks, CIS baseline controls. It's good incident management. It's good data security. It's having a crisis management plan. You know, these are not new or novel things. Many organizations have already got some of or all of these elements in place. I think what's really the real benefit here is that it's bringing a common layer and a common language.
A unified framework of the bits and the pieces we see across the board. Because honestly, I mean, just to build on what you said, I couldn't agree more. We see lots of customers that, yes, they might have the licenses, but they haven't turned them on. They haven't really taken on the full value of the product. So in some cases, they already own what they need to get ready and have a healthy baseline of security, but they have to turn it on. And then in other cases, of course, others have to acquire the technology they need to protect themselves. And this is where I really feel that the benefit of our top security partner network with you guys at the forefront really becomes critical for customers to look into.
Yeah.
So,
and
Tomás,
if I may, if I may add a few sentences on this, is also, you know, that I think that, you know, the awareness piece here is critical, right? I think that, you know, we did a survey and we found out that very low percentage of the customers were really aware that this is coming, right? And I think that, you know, to Nicky's point, right, a lot of customers have already the solutions, but they are not fully deploying. So I think that, you know, partners like CWSI play a critical role in really becoming the trusted advisors for customers, for organizations in this journey, and helping them to embrace the end-to-end, basically, security posture, and not just focusing on the topics that they were now, you know, more concerned. Because I think that one of the key aspects of NIS2 is that it's really addressing that, you know, end-to-end kill chain from a security perspective, and not just one part of it. So I think that that's very, very important.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that the level of awareness is still that low. I think possibly it hasn't had the same advertising as the likes of GDPR because it is more focused. But at the same time, I think with cyber attacks and unfortunately, kinetic level conflicts in Europe and other areas going on at the moment, I would think that something like this is going to start getting a lot more focus over the next 18 months. Just going back to, I think you gave a stat earlier on, Tomás, how many organizations do we believe are affected in the EU?
So in the European Union, we have an estimate around 180,000 organizations from 18 sectors. Let me share that on the 18 sectors
However,
we have.
If I may interject, it becomes quite interesting because we may have 180K minimum organizations affected across the European Union, but actually every organization that does business with an entity in the European Union will be affected as well. And that's something that a lot of the regions I work with across EMEA are starting to wake up to, because many organizations outside of the EU do business with us, right? We are a hub within the world. And so the awareness on that is even lower that we see across the EU classic estates.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that would be a good thing, because like typically if the main organizations have to raise their cybersecurity baseline and their improve their cyber hygiene, one of the key elements of that is looking at their supply chain, looking at their key partners, looking at their key vendors, which is your big vendors like yourselves, but also all the way down through to, as we've seen before, the guys who provide the air conditioning units, as to reference back to a hack a number of years ago. So I think it's going to drive a lot of standards, but it is going to be, I think it will be a lot more difficult for maybe those small to medium-sized suppliers, because they're not going to have maybe the budgets or the expertise in some of those areas. So I think there is a lot of good information out there to help those kind of guys. I think they should be really reaching out to partners and stuff, because there is a lot of tooling that can still get them to a really good level. They don't have to be spending huge amounts of money to be able to potentially light up licensing that they already have in place, or just get better processes and stuff in place. But it is going to be a rising tide. Hopefully, will raise all boats in this scenario.
And Paul, I love that you made. Sorry to interject, Tomás. Paul, I love that you made this point, because end of the day, it comes down to cost as well. And I think this is where the point of breach and platform solutions become so much more important. Looking into what is the vendor that can give you a holistic solution to the maximum extent you need for business than getting point solutions, right? I mean, best of breed, best of platform, ongoing discussion in the industry. And TCO, of course, becomes critical for this.
Absolutely.
And if you think about the size of the organizations, right, we have, and it's clear from the regulation that we have two set of entities. One that the regulation calls them essential entities, which are large organizations. What do we mean by larger companies for the regulation? Is basically organizations with more than 250 employees. So not really like big organizations, right? Yeah. And then you have on the other side the important entities, which are basically the medium-sized enterprise, that are organizations that are basically more than between 50 and 250 employees. So you can imagine that, from a resource and from a budget perspective, organizations that are really small are really will be looking to leverage on partners, or will be looking to leverage on that, best of breed, best of platform approach to make sure that, they can strengthen their cybersecurity posture, not only, to be compliant, but also really to have like a cost takeout or a cost, optimization in all the investments that they do.
Yeah.
And here the expertise on platform integration becomes really important, that you guys, for example, CWSI can do, and generally security recommended partners from the vendors like us.
Yeah. So I think another question maybe for yourself, Tomás, just specifically, there's a couple of key areas that make up the NIS2 directive, right? And I think from what I've observed from some of our own customers, there tends to be a lot of focus in the areas that maybe they're already comfortable with, or they've already got investment in, but maybe not so much in other areas. Is that something you're seeing as well? And could you expand on that?
I couldn't agree more, Paul. I see that, when we look into the NIS2 has 4 key pillars, okay? One of those pillars is really, detecting and protecting against cyber attacks. And I think that area is quite mature now in the market. I think that organizations with all the, extend the XDR solutions with the, the defenders, they have been, prioritizing that. But then you have other pillars, like if we look into the principles, that is basically data governance, data security, how to minimize the impact of cybersecurity incidents when they happen, right? Because sometimes, you know, it's not like preventing, but hey, when you have a cybersecurity incident, how you can minimize the impact of that. I think that speaks to, you know, having a proper data security and data governance in place. And this is, I think, the area that it will become really, you know, something that organizations have not been focusing a lot, and this will become a hot topic, right? Making sure that you have control over your data, rather than not only focusing on the external threats, because we have seen a lot, you know, data leakages, insiders in organizations really, you know, leaking data in a negligent or in a, you know, malicious way. So I think that area is really, in my opinion, the area that is becoming, you know, a hot topic now that was not in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I see the same. I think there's a lot more focus now on, we've kind of done a lot of the perimeter work. We've maybe got our identity management under control. We've put in things like MFA and zero trust. We've introduced XDR. You know, we're starting to see a lot more uptake of SOC services so they can get their incident management under control. Now that is still more focused at the bigger end of the market, but it's starting to trickle down. We currently have a SOC service ourselves that we can extend down to like those smaller organizations that you were talking about. But I think the one area that hasn't had a lot of love or a lot of attention in a lot of organizations is assuming all that fails, which it likely will. Okay, you might stop 95% of the attacks, but a very targeted attacker will get in somehow. You then have to minimize that damage, that blast radius, and do that assumed breach model. And I think things like encryption, data classification, DLP, understanding the baseline of what's normal in your organization. So, you know, Tomás normally logs in from here, accesses these files from this location. And hang on, why is he suddenly pulling down files from a different SharePoint repository and dumping them onto a device that he hasn't used before? You know, starting to understand these exceptions so that you can investigate them. And then I'm really excited about things like, I'm starting to see like adaptive protection, so being able to actually use those signals and then change your DLP policy. So you can say, hang on, this is something unusual. The risk level has changed here for whatever reason. So let's maybe put a more comprehensive DLP policy in place so we can minimize the damage or prevent it from happening in the first place.
Absolutely, and I think adaptive protection is really a game changer in this area, because it's really balancing data security with productivity, right? Because then you are classifying the level of risk of each user and enforcing which are the DLP controls that you want to do based on on how risky that user is. And I think that area, which is very clear in the regulation, that is one of the principles, right? Data security and data governance is really, you know, will become a crucial area for customers to invest more, to really start thinking how they can, you know, strengthen their data security, not their cyber security, but their data security in their own organization. Definitely.
Yeah, and it's a one thing that I think has driven an ability in that's changed from, I've been in the industry over 20 years. I've done a lot of attempts at data classification programs back in the early days when everything was on-prem and siloed, and it was always very, very difficult. It's not an IT exercise typically, it's a business-oriented exercise to do, and that can be very difficult.
Even legal at times, actually.
Exactly, and compliance. But I think cloud has changed that story. So for me, when your data is in the cloud, you have much more scalability to be able to find, tag, and classify your data. And those tools are maturing and getting better all the time. So I personally think that it's something that maybe organizations might have said, we'd love to do, but it's very difficult. So we're putting it on the end of our list. Should reevaluate that and look at it again, because I think there's a lot of, you know, the more of their workloads and their data they shift into the cloud, the more capability there potentially is to be able to get management control.
Well, actually, Paul, I think this is something I feel quite passionate about. I think innovation that we bring into the market at the moment really gets all of these topics at the forefront, but also I think going back to the point we made earlier about awareness. I think those processes back in the on-prem days were really, really hard, really difficult, a lot of resource-heavy processes. While now with the current innovation and how we're evolving technology in general in this space, it's so much simpler and easier to do that and achieve this level of security across your data estate. And I think that's something that we shouldn't really not underestimate as a point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and
So I
if I
suppose,
go back,
Right.
just to finish the topic on data security, I think that also what we see, speaking to customers, is that really some customers are looking for guidance on how they should, organize themselves, right, to take on a data security project.
Correct.
And I think that partners, like in the case you, CWSI, you play a crucial role of, being the kind of the advisors, on being, the partner of the organizations in this journey, because this is a new topic for them. They haven't invested, they haven't thought through how to structure the organization, how to have their processes in place. And I think that that's also another
And get the
important part, that the
governance plan
partners,
running.
yeah, exactly. So the partners play a critical role also, not from the technology side, but also from the advisory point of view.
Yeah, it's a very interesting space. It's something I work in a lot myself, and it's a very business analysis consultancy led approach. As I always tell our customers, we spend the bulk of our time in the discuss and design phases. The actual technology implementation, once you've got that piece right, is not super difficult.
This is what we see as well.
Implement controls if you don't understand your data and you don't understand what you're trying to do in the first place. So that's, I think organizations need to understand that that's where you need to spend your time. You need to understand the business requirements, understand the regulatory requirements like we're talking about today, understand your minimum risk that you're willing to put up with in your organization. And then from there you can put in your classifications, your controls, your DLP, because it is a challenge. Every organization goes, give me a framework, tell me how to do this. You say, well, every organization is going to be different. Your crown jewels are different than this crown jewels.
Exactly.
Your KFC, your secret
Exactly.
recipe,
Spot
your
on.
secret recipe. It's very different in different organizations, but it's always the same questions. And I think that's the bit that we think we like to help our customers with, is we ask the right questions so we can start building out those requirements and then get to a design from there.
That's key. That's key.
Just to finish up, I'm conscious we had a lot to talk about. We'll probably talk about this all day long. We have an unfortunately limited set of time. So just a couple of final questions on this, or one general question. In terms of this directive, right, we've seen things like this before with GDPR and the e-privacy directive, which have had, I think, good results, but there will still be some debate about the effectiveness of them and how they could have been improved. What are your personal thoughts on this around NIS2 and what it's going to do? And do you think it's going to be effective, and is it going to work?
Perfect. Let me
Maybe
start.
I can start first.
Well,
okay, you guys.
You go first.
Tomás,
No, you go.
Ladies first.
Ladies first. Okay.
Yeah, ladies first.
Well, I think we touched on quite a few of the points. NIS2 will bring a set of common standards that companies have to meet at minimum. We also said that it will establish a solid baseline for security posture with customers as well. And I think this is really what we've been missing a lot. We see a lot of customers, like I mentioned earlier, at different stage of their security evolution. And so I think this is the moment where we can get everybody at one level and from there evolve depending on their business needs and requirements moving forward. I also think that it really puts us as a vendor, and many others of course, but also our most valued and trusted partners at the front to really help customers understand. Because Paul, as you said just earlier, data security, as an example, is not just about the technology, the integration, and the tech part. It's actually a lot about understanding what you have, how you protect it, how you classify it, how you label it, and how you look after it in a long-term point of view. Not to mention all of that has cost implications for everybody. And I think having one directive to look at all of us in the ecosystem is a great starting point into evolving together.
Thanks, Nikki. Tomás?
I can only echo Nikki, to be honest, Paul, because I think that NIS2 is not introducing new challenges, right? I think that this will be quite effective because the challenges are already there, and NIS2 is really creating clarity on which are those challenges and which are the requirements that companies should take to address those challenges that they are already facing. So I see, that NIS2 is kind of like an outcome of what we are seeing now in the cybersecurity market. So really, what I would say is that NIS2 should be an opportunity for customers to really start thinking and basically take on a framework that that they can do in order to improve their cybersecurity posture. And I think that now with the AI models, and now that we're going to basically release the M365 Copilot, which is basically the AI model from ChatGPT into our Office 365
productivity
apps.
on steroids, as I love to call it.
Exactly, but that comes with a lot of risk if customers don't have their data classified and if they know where their sensitive data is. Because it's not that Copilot is not a secure tool, but basically Copilot will expose a lot faster the information that you don't have classified. So I think that all this comes in a very timely manner, and I would really.
And I actually, Tomás, you prompted me to add something that I personally feel it's probably one of the best things that NIS2 will bring to all of us. And it's the proactive element of really making sure your business is in the right place from a security and even data security point of view. While until now, and many of the customers I talk to in my past roles in Microsoft and now, even partners if you wish, everybody is in a way reactive or post-breach type of, mechanism coming into place under a lot of stress, while NIS2 will really help us all learn how to be proactive and on time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point with the proactivity, and a very maybe simplified analogy that I like to think of. All of us have had very strong policies, procedures, and controls around a fire in our building. Every single organization will have fire training, they have fire drills, they have insurance, excuse me, they have a whole very mature set of, and it'll be common across Europe and around the world, but we don't have the same thing when it comes to cybersecurity. And I think having a directive or a regulation is just starting to mature the industry. Like cyber is not a nice to have or a new thing now. Most of our economy can't run without the technology that's there. So protecting it is probably as important or more important than protecting the premises and buildings from fire and flood. So personally, that's where my simple way of looking at how these things are going to evolve. So I'm quite hopeful about it. I think there's probably going to be a NIS3. And also, I think something you mentioned there, Tomás, you just triggered my mind for maybe one of our next sessions is we'll probably have to start talking about the AI directive, and maybe we can talk about Copilot and ChatGPT and all those elements as well. But I think that's a great idea for a future thought leadership session.
Let's do it. Great. We have our next session then.
So I'd like to thank everyone today. Tomás, Nikki, I really appreciate your time. I know you're very busy people. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us today. It was an enjoyable conversation. Love to do this maybe over a coffee or something in person sometime. We can organize it, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. It was a delight to join you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Really insightful conversation.